The Christian faith stands alone in the world as crucicentric, meaning it is centered upon the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on a cross. And to remove that idea, you might have a moral framework or some wise ideas to draw from, but you wouldn't have Christianity. The cross of Jesus has multiple implications for everyone, but in these videos, I want to focus our thoughts on ways the cross speaks to our mind and our heart. This is Pastor Chris White, your presenter for this series. I call this the four pieces of the cross because ultimately each of these, when embraced, brings us to a resting place of peace, a peace that passes all understanding. The first piece is Shalom. Shalom is a greeting used today by millions of Jewish and Arabic speakers. It can be as simple as hello and goodbye, but shalom has a deeper meaning. In the Bible, the shalom of God speaks of well-being, wholeness, soundness, completeness, harmony, and tranquility. In 1972, Pope Paul IV started a worldwide campaign with the phrase, "If you want peace, work for justice." He was speaking of the relationship between nations, which at the time was a global Cold War between democracy and communism. But he knew that real peace between people is not an absence of hostility, but a genuine seeking of their well-being. And so when we speak of the shalom of God, we're speaking of that which brings wholeness and health to the heart of man. Now, how does the cross assure us of God's intentions of peace? In Romans 5:10 we read, "For if while we were enemies we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more, now that we're reconciled, shall we be saved by his life." First and foremost, let me point out that God took the initiative in your salvation. Since the Garden of Eden, God has pursued his highest creation, while mankind has gone its own way. You know, the Apostle Paul's pretty straight here. Apart from grace, we were not just a bunch of lovable lost sheep doing no harm. We're actually God's enemies. I can easily recall moments in my own younger days when I knew what I was doing and saying was an abomination to God, and I did it anyway. Maybe you can recall such things as well. That is our natural man at work, and he's always going to be hostile towards God. But the cross speaks here and says, even before you cared for me, I cared for you and took the initiative in reconciliation. Colossians 1:21 elaborates even more on this idea. God is not just populating heaven with a bunch of people who really don't deserve it, but he's let them off the hook. Christ took your place, not only in punishment, but also in life. He lived the life you should have lived, and he died the death you should have died, that it might be credited to you. It is a righteousness, not of our own doing, but of Christ's doing. But in the giving of this righteousness, we're more than just people who are forgiven. In the eyes of God, and emerging as a reality within us, is a wholeness and healing of our soul within. Is that true of you? Are you experiencing the shalom of God, even if it's in fits and starts? That's God's intention for you at the cross. In John 14:27, we read, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." The very night of Jesus' betrayal, in the full knowledge of the horrific death he was about to suffer, the Lord is concerned about the well-being of his disciples. Now, I would have wanted to be comforted, but instead Jesus offers his comfort to his closest friends. When he says, "Let not your heart be troubled or be afraid," he's not telling them to whistle in the darkness or get a grip on their feelings. Jesus is looking past the trauma and what is ultimately going to be accomplished. Not only will there be forgiveness of sins and the righteousness of God, but He will be sending the Holy Spirit to indwell everyone who trusts, and the Spirit will create a new heart in us, which will be whole and in harmony with God. And with that, we conclude part 1 of the 4 pieces of the cross. In our next segment, we'll look at relief, the second piece of the cross. Until then, this is Chris White. Thanks for watching.